The fear of death can make anyone desperate to escape, but finding a way out is impossible. It is inevitable. If you are alive, you will someday die. And it's even more bittersweet when it's a disease that's slowly eating at you. Because at some point, it doesn't feel like it's just walking you into death. It feels like it's taking the life you have too. Having a definitive timeline for your existence feels like knowing the ending of a mysterious book but still reading it anyway. Tears stain the page with every turn. You try to convince yourself that things could still turn out differently, maybe if you just started in the middle of the book or read every other page. Change it up a bit. In the end, the last page is always the same. In this show, we follow a group of teens spending their last years in a group home. Within these walls, they try everything they can to cope, stop, and slow down their demise. In turn, they find themselves and bond over the grief that hugs them so tightly. They are brave and also scared, all at the same time. At the end, they will come to terms with who they are and how things are together. So let's take the journey through life and death with the Midnight Club. Spoilers ahead. Also, like and sub if you love content like this. Let's get started. We meet our main character, Ilanka, who is a high school senior, but moreover, she is valedictorian of her high school class. She's an overachiever with a high standard for herself, but her world is about to be rocked. She and a friend attend a college party in order to venture out of their usual surroundings when she realizes something is terribly wrong. She coughs into her hands and realizes that she's bleeding internally. Obviously, no one anticipates a devastating diagnosis when they're still a child, but Ilanka is determined to set herself apart from the odds and overcome the cancer that has thus far interrupted a pretty exciting career path/life path. I say this as if it's something that is largely a non-issue, but ultimately Ilanka is swimming upstream in a battle against her own body. And when her friend ends up moving on with her life and going toward her college career, she seems like she's feeling left out. This is compounded by the news that her chemo isn't working and that her situation has become terminal. It's possible that she may not even make it past a year at this point. In an effort to take control of the situation, Ilanka begins researching a hospice facility that's focused on teens in need of a home before they pass away. Moreover, the situation intrigues her because there was once a woman who proclaimed that she had recovered from her cancer because she lived in this facility. The center calls to Ilanka, and she proclaims that it's her destiny to live within its walls, that she desperately needs to be in this facility while she transitions into the next part of her life. Meanwhile, she is having visions about the facility, prompting her to feel even more connected to the surrounding area and the people within the house. Actually, the people that she meets also feel an instant kinship with her, like they were meant to know one another, or that they knew each other in a past life. The house where the kids stay has a rich history, one that can be characterized as significant, a halfway house, etc. Brightcliffe is an extension of the Flanagan universe, where houses hold feelings and the people within those walls are haunted by those feelings. The house takes on a life of its own. Normally, a home is pretty neutral in its existence. But more often than not, Flanagan allows the feelings of the home's inhabitants to flow through the existence of that home, as if feelings can seep into the paint or the floorboards of a house. Ilanka physically sees the ghosts as a presence when she walks into the home. Really, she's been seeing them all along, but they've never been as blatantly obvious as they are when she actually walks into Brightcliffe. They're like hallucinations at this point. The headmistress of the home gives a speech about how people normally address cancer. She states that Brightcliffe isn't about giving up the battle with cancer. It's about forgiving your body and moving on with what little time there is left to live. The aggressive nature of the way we speak about cancer is not a way to live with it. It's giving the diagnosis too much energy and thought. Living life to the fullest doesn't require a battle and shouldn't require a battle. Ilanka notices the girl from the newspaper article in one of the pictures on the wall, one of the newspaper articles that she had read before she got in there, and one of the reasons why she actually felt a kinship to this place in the first place. But it's hotly debated whether or not this girl is a hoax or the real deal. Regardless, I think Ilanka feels safe with the thought that she can cure her own cancer. It gives her hope. We learn about the other residents at the facility one by one. We are also introduced to their different diagnoses: glioblastoma, ovarian cancer, etc. There are some other defining features / quirks about the residents, but I wanted to mention the diagnosis references because it seems like they wear their diagnosis like a badge of honor, taking possession of their power rather than allowing the diagnosis to define them. Things become a bit too real when the kids have to address the fact that there is a morgue in the lower level of the building. Ilanka's stepdad isn't too keen on the idea of letting her stay there, but she is adamant and he lets his daughter go. It's strange because obviously he should have been guiding her into the school at this point, into her college life, but now he is reluctant to let her go at a hospice facility. It's a sour moment, and when he leaves, you can feel that he feels as if he is just abandoning his daughter. Ilanka meets Anya, her new roommate. Their conversation starts with the fact that Ilanka notices symbols under her bed. Anya states that she had an old roommate, Rachel, who was likely the person that put them there. Anya is a contrast to Ilanka. While one believes in magic and is hopeful for the future because of that magical thinking, Anya is a much more grounded and cynical version of a cancer patient, guarded by the fact that time is not something that has ever been or will ever be on her side. We learn a little bit more about the kids during dinner. They talk a bit about how things go around this place and also about how long they've been there. They've seen all kinds of people come and go, and it's kind of a devastating reality because the going isn't just leaving, it's a forever goodbye. I'd imagine older folks feel a lot like this by the end of their life cycle, like people around them just kind of keep dropping like flies. But in this microcosm of illness, it's probably a much more prominent circumstance, made even more bitter by the fact that these are not older adults. They're teens in the prime of their lives. They should be moving and going to college and finding careers, but instead they're here in this place. Anya goes into detail about her old roommate, Rachel's behavior toward the end of her life. She says that Rachel felt as if there was a presence constantly watching her, that the shadow of something was following her, close enough to touch her at times, really. And then, supposedly, when she said that, she died the next day. There are many iterations of this story that constantly float throughout the zeitgeist of this house, and it's sort of something that brings drama and tension. So it's something to be taken with a grain of salt, really. Drama and tension with teens is unavoidable, even in a house where everyone is, dying. Some of these teens bicker and fight back and forth, and you get a sense that it's because they're dying, actually, that they have to keep up this snarky infighting. Ilanka has horrid dreams, and that night she dreams the people that she's met in the house are all sitting around a table near a fire. But the lot of them have passed on. Their bodies lay in their seats, deceased. She wakes up to find Anya on her way to somewhere else in the house, and she follows her through the dark hallways toward a room she's never seen before. She finds the kids in this room, and it looks identical to the room from her dream. They're all drinking, and it's clear that they are telling stories to one another, like a version of the Midnight Society on Nickelodeon. The stories they tell are terrifying. Natsuko is up tonight, and she tells the story of a boy who's been walking on a lonely road toward his house. The road is empty, but there is music playing. The scene has been set, and the jump scares are all in motion, happening pretty much over and over and over again. The boy hears a melody, and he can't get it out of his head. Then he sees people in the windows of the homes that surround him. They're all looking at him now. One asks if he needs help. He says that he's lost. He doesn't know what's happening, which is a scary concept in and of itself, really. Being lost on a street that you actually know, that you recognize, in a place you can't escape, or a body that, is changing and dying, but you can't escape. You see so much of the struggles from the teens' lives in the framework of their stories, much like any artist, really. The framework of their mind comes about on a paper as a picture, in film, or through writing. Forced to take a swig if she wants to stay, Ilanka takes a large swig and begins her story in order to be inducted into the club. She tells a story that oddly parallels her own life, about a girl who has been diagnosed with thyroid cancer and enters into hospice. The girl in the story begins to obsess about the date of her potential or inevitable demise, repeating over and over and over again to herself the date. The girl who had previously met the love of her life started to hear his voice echoing within the walls of the hospice, driving her to explore the lowest portion of the facility. Julia, the girl, ends up disappearing from the facility and then coming back a month later, despondent and suddenly cured of her cancer. Apparently, she also developed a clairvoyance for predicting when other people would pass away. Julia could no longer see her own demise, but she could see everyone else's ending. It's a fate that I believe Ilanka sees for herself, really. So, what is this really? These teens aren't just meeting to tell scary stories. They're meeting so that when they die, one of them will let the others know what happens after death. That they will do their best to reach out through time and space and let them know, hey, I'm here, or to just, I guess, live in silence. The history of the house holds the truth for Ilanka, and she is determined to live. She believes that the house holds the secrets to getting past her diagnosis, and she tells the person she's grown closest to, Kevin, about this. It seems like Ilanka is now focused on the naturopathic route. Sometimes it feels like the entire show makes it feel like Ilanka is actually being dragged into a health scam by ghosts. It's reminiscent of shows like Apple Cider Vinegar, which focuses on patient desperation and how people looking for an alternative route often cling onto natural remedies that they find on the internet through charlatans. Ilanka starts talking about Julia Jane, and the headmistress reacts in a strong way to the mention of her name. This perks Ilanka's interest, but the headmistress dismisses her inquiry by telling her that Julia had been misdiagnosed. It most certainly seems like there is something more to this mystery, that there is a ghost with secrets somewhere, but it is yet to be seen whether or not there is any truth to Julia's story. She also asks about Paragon, a cult that used to use the house long before it was a sanctuary for sick teens. The headmistress dismisses this as well. Natsuki sits outside of a room reading into an intercom system for her friend Tristan, who is in dire straits and needs a pick-me-up. It's easy to forget that everyone here is going to go soon because they all look so able-bodied and they still have their wits about them. So Tristan is a brief but poignant reminder that this is actually happening. Anya calls out Ilanka for trying to naturopath her way out of cancer in a group therapy session. She points out that she's seen it all, absolutely everything, and nothing has ever worked. No matter how unusual or natural, the kids that came in with the hope of curing their cancer all ended up in the same place, which is probably why Anya is so walled off. She continues to live, and in turn, this means over and over again, she has watched the people she is rooming with perish into the afterlife. Ilanka isn't deterred by Anya and ends up calling her out in the room after their interaction. The chip on Anya's shoulder has been there for too long, and she's forgotten that just basic interactions are a part of a normal living situation. Ilanka has every right to feel like she's trying and that she's being rejected. And it also makes sense that Anya is angry at the world. Ilanka goes into the woods near Brightcliffe and meets a person named Shasta, a woman who is sneaking onto the property to collect water. It seems that she herself is into natural remedies and alternative medicine. She highlights Ilanka's name and its meaning, which is light. Shasta also promotes the water as having healing properties. She's clearly one of those people who applies a lot of meaning into things that others may not. The mysticism she brings to the table intrigues Ilanka because Ilanka is smart, but she brings an element of spiritualism into her interactions and thoughts. So it's obvious that she would feel drawn to someone who is providing all of these spiritual insights about the land, confirming her already existing views that there is something magical about Brightcliffe. Kevin is clearly putting on a show for his family, making them feel better about his diagnosis instead of having to witness them face the reality of what is to come. Amesh talks about his desire to complete his before I die list, and one of those wishes is to fold 1,000 origami. While they're doing this, Spence slices his finger on accident and blood flies onto Anya's shirt. He quickly darts away, apologizing. Spence isn't in hospice because he has cancer. He's actually in hospice because he has AIDS. Once again, Ilanka is being criticized by Anya when she realizes that Ilanka feels sorry for Spence. It's all the same, Anya says, but she does point out that Spence hears a lot of judgment from other people because of his diagnosis. There are ignorant comments that follow, not to mention a distance that people create when they figure out why he is in the hospice or that he has AIDS. It makes sense that she wants Ilanka to react indifferent because she doesn't want Spence to feel like he is different, even if that different feeling comes from pity. Mark, the nurse at the facility, points out that Spence is not afflicted with AIDS because he is gay, essentially telling him that he is normal, that the general population has just as much risk of acquiring the virus as anyone else. It seems that Ilanka isn't the only person who is being haunted, though. Anya also sees ghosts. This is a similar premise to that of The Haunting of Hill House. The idea that the mind and body can create a spirit outside of itself, which, for all of the bad, uneasy feelings that show up within the house, there is a space that is physically sort of occupied. The fear, loneliness, and sadness that these kids are experiencing is beyond what their minds can comprehend. This time, instead of family trauma, we're exploring the same concept through the lens of illness. Ilanka tells everyone about her encounter with Shasta in the mountains, and it starts to seem like Shasta is kind of a figment of her imagination because no one else has ever encountered her. But we know by the end that that's not the case. This time, it's Anya's turn to tell a story, and her story is about the two Danas, a perfect ballerina who moves to another city where she meets a boy and falls in love, and he appreciates her perfection. Dana wanted to be a normal kid, but it seems that her destiny felt torn. She couldn't live in the same body and subject herself to unhealthy habits and still maintain her perfection as a dancer. So she decides that she is to sell her soul to the devil, even though the devil says that that's not what's happening. That's definitely what's happening. The devil looks suspiciously like the headmistress of Brightcliffe, too. So the devil decides that she should split herself in two in order to maintain her perfect life while also engaging in all of these fun things that kids her age do. Dana notices that herself is in the mirror, and now she's come out of the mirror into the room. They designate each other Dana 1 or 2, and they decide that one of them is going to go out to this rave. They both experience the same things, and it doesn't really matter which one plays which role. I don't see how drugs and rock and roll wouldn't affect both of them in this case, but yeah. And it does end up affecting both of them physically. So Dana 2 heads to this rave, and now she can have all of these experiences that her other self is having. She quickly learns that she cannot separate herself in this way, and she continues to struggle to maintain her status as a dancer when Dana 2 develops a nasty drug habit. Everyone, especially her boyfriend, notices the struggle, but she attacks him and pushes him away. She's desperate to stop her second self from continuing her downfall, so she brutalizes her own body, forcing Dana to contact her, Dana too, I guess, to contact her in an attempt to stop her from doing any more damage. Both Danas realize that they can't live in separate lives anymore. One of them has to go. When they meet up, and they can't decide who was the first to be there and who was the second, they both end up taking a shot at one another. At the end of the story, the Dana that lived to inhabit the body doesn't know which one she is. And when she pleads with the devil, saying, "I was never like this isn't me," referring mostly to the pain that she's caused the other people in her life since her separation, the devil lets her know that she's actually always been like this and that the other Dana is in hell, where she's still living a painful life. Her amputation is another reminder, because her leg was amputated after the shootout, that she has lost so much within the framework of her existence. One that's left Anya, or Dana, I guess in this case, angry and burned by her existence, wondering which of her counterparts actually has it better, the one on Earth feeling scorched or the one in hell suffering for all eternity. Anya's tough exterior is a defense mechanism, but it's also a diluted way for her to say that she is sorry, to protect the people around her. She realizes how distant and vitriolic her personality can be, but the other teens understand that it's her way of telling them that she isn't going to be around for long, that none of them are going to be around for long, so they need to protect themselves from becoming attached to one another in a more meaningful way. Ilanka breaks into the headmistress's office after the story in order to get the records for Julia and learn a little bit more about her time at Brightcliffe. And she ends up running into some gnarly looking ghosts on the way. Beyond that, she gets transported to a different time entirely, and the episode ends with her asking, "WTF?" Ilanka tells Kevin about her interaction with old Brightcliffe in the previous episode. It sort of morphed and mashed into this time period that Ilanka didn't recognize that was clearly from the past. So she's telling Kevin about that. Kevin sort of dismisses her visions as a side effect of her medications that she's on, and she dismisses his dismissal by heading to bed. A mysterious group of people with candles stalks the halls of Brightcliffe, but really it's just Ilanka, once again, dreaming about what she thinks happened before her time there. The drawings she's pulled from the file, Julia's file, are eerie and don't give too much of a backstory. So I guess these dreams are as close to an answer as she has for right now. We learn that Anya doesn't really have anyone coming to see her at the family day meeting for the house. Ilanka invites her to come and join herself and her father at the meeting instead. It's just another pin in the tough exterior that Anya has built up, something to kind of warm her iciness. Ilanka isn't exactly pressuring a friendship, but she remains with her hand out even in the midst of rejection, which starts to kind of thaw Anya a little bit. But the kids and their parents have complicated situations to work through during these meetings, and even more complicated relationship problems. It's like they're all trying to navigate the complexities of how to treat their terminally ill loved ones. And the kids feel like glass, or as Anya put it, zoo animals. And I think that's one of the most heartbreaking problems with this specific disease is you don't really know how to treat the person in front of you because you don't want them to feel different. Just like Anya didn't want Spence to feel different, people looking on the outside of cancer towards someone with cancer, you don't really know how to treat them. It's the same concept. I think one of the worst interactions that we see is Spence and his dad. It's clear that Spence's mom has chosen not to come, essentially to disown him, to make him a pariah of his community, as well as going to church and not accepting her own son and accepting the church's dismissal of her son and his quote unquote lifestyle. Spence's dad is far too forgiving at the notion of his dying child being neglected by his own mother, though. Ilanka finds out in the worst way that Kevin has a girlfriend by calling her his sister. Clearly, she was under the assumption that he had no girlfriend, and the girlfriend makes a mad dash for his hand when she sees that he hasn't told the new girl about his girlfriend. It's probably incredibly difficult to maintain a relationship at that age when the person you love is literally dying, or the person that you love is someone that's being left behind, on Kevin's end. And there's an obvious kinship that comes along with the relationship between Kevin and Ilanka because they can relate to one another about things that no one else can relate to them about. Ilanka moves on toward her own dad, and it seems that Anya has been entertaining him with her wit. It's great to see Anya stepping out of her shell when it comes to Ilanka and new experiences. Unfortunately, not everyone is willing to join the group, though, even with the welcome wagon that's been rolled out for everyone. Sandra sticks by herself in her room and is presented with gifts from her mother to make up for the fact that she isn't interested in the child that she has that's dying of cancer in a home for sick teens. Mark assures her that she matters to all of them, despite her mom being the absolute worst. Natsuki visits Tristan once again and realizes that she's reached the end of her life. She grabs her hand and begins to cry. Again, it's hard to forget, but even harder to remember that these kids are dying. It's possible that it's just hard to sit with the fact that they have a more concrete expiration date than the rest of us who aren't ill do. It's something that we don't really think about. Some actively try to avoid thinking about it, actually. Even when faced so directly with the consequences of life, it's still so easily ignored until it's right there at your door, and then you can't help but let it in. We learn that Julia had art therapy, and within her art, there are clues about whatever she was feeling, seeing, and experiencing while she was at Brightcliffe. Kevin seems to think that Ilanka is simply trying to distract herself from the inevitability of her certain demise. It makes herself feel better about what she's going through. Ilanka is being dismissed by everyone around her, but it makes sense that the other teens are dismissing her actions as nothing but distraction. They've all seen desperation and the process of coming to grips with their diagnosis. Hell, they've all been through it themselves, really. So while I understand her frustration, she's only been there for weeks, and the other members of the house have had plenty of time to sit with the things that they feel and that they know. Natsuki treats the room Tristan died in like a creepy lair where some monster lives. She avoids even looking at it at one point, only to submit to the call of her fears and go inside. But it's determined by the group that anything that happened after Tristan's death was just a matter of twitchiness after death, because there is a point where Tristan's body seems to move, and it's more than likely just like a reaction, a muscle reaction after death. No matter, they go on with their story night and creating ghosts for themselves. Kevin tells a story about the perfect son that he has been pressured to be for his family. Especially since his diagnosis, it seems like his family has started to put him on an even higher pedestal. This might be a coping mechanism, but it seems like the family has kind of always sort of had this dysfunctional way of being. So he creates a world where he is so different from himself, where he is the quote unquote bad guy. His mother in the story is pretty vegetative. She doesn't talk and she doesn't seem to even move, but somehow she is still controlling his life through his mind, really. Someone breaks into a house within the story and does away with a child that is in the room. We find out it's Kevin and that he is actually a serial killer. He leaves his calling card behind at the scene to make sure that the deaths are connected to one another. Kevin seems like he feels trapped by his good guy image, like he is leaving the people behind that love him, and in turn, that lets them down. Everyone knowing about his impending retreat from life makes him feel responsible for their sadness, responsible for their responses in general to that sadness. His mother ignores the fact that he is not going to be here after his expiration date. She chooses instead to focus on his accomplishments nonstop and the other children living up to Kevin's accomplishments. Kevin befriends Sheila in the story, which is Ilanka. In his story, he depicts her as a helpful friend who wants to check on the young girl that Kevin decided to go after the night before, where he left his calling card. The young girl seems to represent his current girlfriend, and Ilanka seems to be, in the story at least, in his way, a new friend that he's attached himself to with more relatability. He knows that he's hurting his girlfriend, or that he is hurting her more with the fact that he is falling for someone else. His guilt is eating at him. Ilanka tries to figure out the mystery of what happened to Nancy, the girlfriend, just like she's trying to figure out what's happened to Julia. Julia in the real world has art with symbols on it, and one of the symbols from Julia's art is something that Ilanka recognizes from the elevator. So she triggers the button on the elevator with that symbol, and it takes her and Kevin into a deeper area of the house, one that isn't easily accessed. Ilanka gets trapped in the area and sees ghosts like usual. It seems like the house has more to hide than they anticipated. There are actually quite a few jump scares in the show. It's pretty jarring, and there are probably more in this show than there were in Hill House or Bly Manor, both of which I have made deep dives on, so you can watch right here. But these jump scares are more sound intensive, and with your headphones on, it's kind of annoying, but it is sufficiently scary. Ilanka reveals more about Brightcliffe than anyone had ever imagined was there. Kevin brings the rest of the patients down to the room that's been neglected for God knows how many years, and it's dark but full of peculiar things. There's a beautiful painting on the wall and a large maze-like painting on the floor. There's a mosaic on the ceiling. It looks like there is something more mystical afoot down in this area, lending credence to what Ilanka says about Brightcliffe, that it may hold secrets and keys to things that are otherworldly. Not only that, but there is where the old midnight club used to convene. This is the area where they used to convene. This is where they used to tell their stories. And they also have a list of names and a roster along with dates of other club members. It looks like an area for cultists, and the group starts to get a little paranoid about what the room actually represents. It doesn't look like it's just for telling stories or the midnight club. There are connections between their group and the groups that used to come down and tell stories. But that makes it even more off-putting, the connections between the two groups. Sandra is especially off-put by the cult layer. She prattles on about how everyone should essentially embrace God in their group therapy the next day because of this interaction. This is largely indicative of how death usually goes. Embracing the unknown can be difficult, and the desire to embrace something that makes us feel good, like a god, or an ultimately good deity, is a choice that many sort of seem to land on. But this effort from Sandra seems forceful and offends Spence, who is constantly being told by religious followers that he is unworthy of love and heaven. Spence feels like religion is a disrespectful notion, that it is ultimately a divider, not a way to conquer the fear of death. Ilanka proceeds to do more research out in the woods when she encounters Shasta again and learns that she runs a popular company that creates wellness products. It's giving charlatan. Regardless, it seems like Ilanka is enamored with her, and the continuous shilling of naturopathic medicine is disturbing when you consider that this is a teenager with not much insight about how the world works who is also dying. Nevertheless, Kevin is on his way to his high school prom with his girlfriend. It's a brief moment, but Ilanka talks about how she misses her hair. And in this moment, I think she feels sort of like a kinship to these small moments that she missed out on by seeing Kevin go to his senior prom. And it's obviously, in the grand scheme of things, it feels like it's just a small experience, a small part of life. And a small part of hair loss is a small part of what cancer and terminal illness take. But it's those small things that highlight just how much loss hurts and burns. Things that are taken for granted before the diagnosis seem so much more important after the diagnosis. Meanwhile, Spence is going in for his treatment, and Mark tells him that even though there are antivirals on the horizon that might be able to work for him, these antivirals are no longer working for him. And when walking out of the treatment area, Spence goes toward the intercom where Natsuki was reading to Tristan, and he hears something on that intercom system. And he tries to jiggle the door to the room. When he does this, he does hear somebody calling out to him. But when he gets Mark and tries to open the door opens quickly and there's no one inside. This room has become a sad representation of everything that the kids are afraid of, including their own mortality. It's hard to tell what is a medication glitch versus what's real. But even among the medication glitches, there is this permeable amount of anxiety that can be felt throughout every interaction the kids have with one another and the interactions they have with the house. So while it's hard to tell what's happening in their mind and what is really taking place, there is still, regardless of all of that, very concrete evidence that whatever's taking hold is so much bigger than they can deal with. And this is another reason that Shasta's appearance is so frustrating. These kids are hopped up on meds, they're extremely anxious, and it's not a great combination for thinking straight. For as bleak as things are, I do find Anya to be a relief when it comes to her humor. She's like an ironic light in the show that keeps shining and making things a little bit funnier. A welcome departure from the scared, cold feeling that sometimes otherwise exists. There are times where people do some pretty hopeful things, but that hope it still has an air about it. I don't know how to describe it. Predictably, Kevin was made prom queen, or prom king, my bad, at his prom. This inclusion only serves to make him feel different and not really better, like it was intended to do. Sandra decides that she would like to tell her story this time when they go to tell stories again. This story is about a detective called Give Me a Kiss. In the story, Spence is with Kevin, and Sandra is Kevin's ex, while Spence is her BFF. Ilanka is also in the story, and Ilanka is also Spence's BFF. So Sandra and Ilanka are Spence's BFF, and Sandra used to date Kevin, but now Kevin is with Spence. Anyway, Spence feels attacked for who he is and for who he loves. In the story, Ilanka and Spence devise a plan to incite a fight between Kevin and Spence on a yacht at a yacht party. The yacht, courtesy of Sandra's father. Spence flies overboard while Kevin and Ilanka worry that they may have done away with him by accident. But really, this is a part of Ilanka and Spence's plan. Spence is going to meet up with her at a house outside of the marina. Kevin dives in after Spence and ends up losing his life tragically. So the plan ended tragically for Kevin. Now the two best friends are at each other's throats because they don't want one to tell on the other. Ilanka shows up at the place where Spence and her were supposed to meet, and she ends up shooting Spence in an effort to quiet him. Ilanka feels terrible about what she's done, so she lights a fire in the home where Spence's body is, and she does away with herself as well. But this is Sandra's version of events within the story. And so we learn, actually, it happened very differently. When Spence kidnaps Sandra, she admits that she is the one who killed Ilanka. She actually admits she set all of this up because she was very jealous of how Kevin and Spence were living. She was jealous of the fact that they had found love. And she sort of muses after the story about how she feels that a lot of people who are religious, who hate and who push that God only loves straight people, how they feel probably very similarly, how they feel as if they cannot find love and they have a problem with someone else finding love or anyone else finding love for that matter. It's her way of telling Spence that she is sorry for trying to push her agenda on him. And she's also apologizing in large part for people who are religious zealots and who are ignorant. He forgives her and they sort of move on from everything that happened that day. Meanwhile, Ilanka and Kevin find a book with the same symbol on it that was used in Kevin's story, which is the half full hourglass. And the half filled hourglass is a very trippy sort of symbol because it says that there is still time because the hourglass is full on the upper part of the hourglass shape. So, yeah. Meanwhile, Anya is tripping out. She is using her medication for drug use, basically. And it makes her susceptible to these glitches that happen with their medication much more often. When Ilanka and Kevin find her in her room, she's fallen out of her wheelchair after seeing a ghostly shadow come toward her. And this is likely death itself. Ilanka ends up resuscitating Anya and feels torn about it because Anya actually has a DNR on file, which is fine, I guess, but she was likely not on the brink of death if it just took a couple tries to get her breathing properly again. So it's unlikely that this would be disrespectful of her wishes. Ilanka tries to broach the subject of what Anya saw, but Anya denies seeing anything at all, really. Ilanka continues her research into the lore of the house and discovers that there were 5 Greek goddesses, all of which the cult members attempted to appease by doing a blood sacrifice and a mass M word within the walls of the house. Julia apparently wanted them to find this book and left it as a message of sorts, according to Ilanka. In an extremely tender and connected moment, Ilanka is gifted a beautiful custom-made wig by Sherry after her comment about missing her hair to Sherry when Kevin was going to prom. It is such a sweet gesture because it's one of those times where someone notices something about you that you need or want, and they give it to you. And I love gifts like that. It's my love language, actually. And you can tell that Ilanka is so grateful to see herself with hair again. The kids meet outside and they do a bonfire funeral thing for Amesh. It's on his list of things that he wants to do before he dies. The suit that he's going to be buried in is being retired because his death date has actually come and passed. He has a new outfit to be buried in and he is leaving his old one behind. Not just that, but the PlayStation that he's been wanting and he was afraid he'd never be able to see released is gifted to him, again by Sherry. She is a really, really nice person. We learn that Natsuki hasn't been coming out of her room and that she has clinical depression. Given the circumstances, it's not hard to understand why, but it seems that even before this point, it's been tough for her mentally. She shares this with Amesh and he can understand her plight. He says that there are so many things that he wants to do with his life and that he's glad that he isn't gone yet because he can do some of them still. But the most important thing he always wanted to do was, quote unquote, get the girl and, quote unquote, save the world. It's a cute moment between the two because you can tell that there is a chemistry there and they are struggling together and they're bridging their loneliness by traveling this road, this path together. Ilanka is seeing ghosts again, like usual, and they are leading her into other parts of the house. The house changes from modern to older looking again, like she's entered a past version of her surroundings. This is the second or maybe even the third time this has happened, so she's not too dumbstruck about it this go round. She encounters Kevin in the hall as well. At first, he seems like a ghostly version of someone else, but he turns around and it's just him. The kids convene in their usual area and start talking about their strange experiences in the house. Still skeptical on the tongue, but thinking about the strange interactions in their minds where they stick. Amesh is getting the chance to tell his story, and he begins it with Natsuki. They bond over gaming, but unfortunately, the story parallels real life, and Natsuki seems just barely out of reach in Amesh's story. A man at the gaming store propositions Amesh to try out a new game. In this game, he can start wars, end the world, or make the world better. Amesh identifies that within the game, it's nearly impossible to actually save the Earth. It's hard not to notice that Amesh strangely looks like the man he's interacting with, and the man's wife strangely looks a lot like Natsuki. But that's neither here nor there, because when he gets too excited about the prospect of being a part of the biggest project in the modern world, he ends up passing out. Turns out Amesh has a bad heart. His time on Earth is limited. Beating the game is still proving to be an impossibility, and meanwhile, the tech man's wife has been enticing Natsuki's boyfriend into a cheating scandal. When they end up getting caught, things get really strange. Someone named Frederick is now involved in the whole fiasco. So the man's wife tells Amesh what exactly is happening. It appears that Natsuki ends up marrying a politician's son. And this sort of sets off a series of events that our main characters are trying to prevent from happening. Natsuki, her best friend Amesh, and her politician husband end up creating a nuclear defense system that activates and destroys the entire world. Then aliens come, and it seems like the entire timeline is a mess, but it looks like everyone was sent back in time via these aliens to change something about the timeline. And they don't know what it is, but they are there to change something. And now Amesh's older self needs to be saved because Frederick has kidnapped him. It seems there's a lot of confusion about how to actually stop these things from happening. The older version of Amesh ends up dying and doesn't write the code, but also Natsuki ends up killing her younger self when she attempts to kill the politician's son, and that changes the timeline permanently. Amesh's younger self does live past the day that he was supposed to be gone, his death date, if you will. Amesh was just excited that he got the chance to save the world. He got the chance to do the things that he had come on this earth to do. Enough time has passed for him to do what he needed to do. And now I guess he sort of feels like death's inevitability doesn't have as much of a bitter sting to it as it would if he never got to do those things. But we also see that he's talking about an underlying theme within Natsuki's life, which is her depression. And even before she divulges how bad her depression was before she got to the house, he kind of understands that she is in a suicide place. And it's played out in the story very nicely. In this episode, we start with part 2 of Kevin's story, and we see that he's chosen a new victim for the story version of himself to stalk. But he's even more haunted than usual by his previous victims. They show up more often, and they are much louder than they were before. Ilanka goes to the detective on the case and posits her theory that there is actually a boy around her age who is committing all of these murders. The detective lets her know that that's not possible because the murders have been going on for too long for that to make any sense. But the detective also starts poking around the school, and specifically she asks Kevin about his IMing accounts. It seems like she also suspects that there is a younger person involved. And perhaps she didn't want Ilanka to know, leading her down another path in order to deflect suspicion. Ilanka is actually next on Kevin's list, but she doesn't know it. He warns her that she's in danger, but she's so incredibly enamored and he's so incredibly vague. So Ilanka doesn't really listen to him. The voices in Kevin's head are not letting it go, though. Ilanka is next, whether he likes it or not. Kevin leaves the group on a cliffhanger because I believe his story with Ilanka is currently being written in real time. So the ending is yet to be seen. Ilanka butts in and starts telling her own story, though. In this story, Ilanka is talking to her mother, and her mother tells her that she can see the future. Ilanka also has this power to see the future. As amazing as that is, it's sort of pointless because she is powerless against changing the outcome of the future. If she tries, there's an increased likelihood that she could make everything so much worse. The idea is that she has this power to help people, but not change the outcome of their fate, and that's pretty devastating. She's also warned not to practice her powers at night, and we see why when she actually does this. Nonetheless, her mother, who works as a doctor, ends up resurrecting a child that looks a lot like Ilanka. This ends her own life, and Ilanka is on her own now. Ilanka is desperate for answers about why her mother has chosen to do this, knowing that it would end up this way. So she uses her powers at night like she isn't supposed to. She sees a young man being shot at a gas station. At this time, she doesn't know what this means, but she'll soon find out. Ilanka somewhat reluctantly joins her midnight club group on a joyride through the town. Obviously, this is still within the story's timeline, so it's not like they're really doing this. A young man she's never met before, Kevin, gets in the car, and her friends go joyriding with Kevin. But now she understands the future vision that she had before she got in the car. Ilanka makes it a point to tell Kevin not to go into the gas station because she knows the outcome of this action. This doesn't change the outcome, though. It just changes who gets hurt in this story, in this specific timeline. Anya goes in Kevin's place, and she ends up being mortally wounded in his absence. So even though Ilanka saved Kevin, she put Anya at risk. It's as if the real Ilanka knows that she shouldn't provide false hope to her friends about their ultimate fate, like she's been doing with Anya this whole time. There's a sentiment that she knows Anya is next on the list of teens that are going to exit Brightcliffe, but she does not embrace this. Instead, she gives Anya a lot of hope through magic or through nature. It also seems like she's feeling uneasy about the role in her friends' lives that she plays, that her hope for the future feels more like drawing out the inevitable in a way that's almost worse than just flat out accepting it. When Story Ilanka goes into the gas station, a totally different gas station on a completely different night, she ends up watching Kevin get killed anyway. So it was super pointless. The rubber band of time and space bounced back much harder than it would have if she had just left things alone. There is no avoiding what is coming. There is no escaping it. Trying to is merely creating a hopeful proposition that something can change, but it can't. Anya passes out, and the air in the house becomes thick with anxiety in the next group meeting because I think they all kind of know where this is going. Some of the kids give the sentiment that they hope death is quick and painless. Ilanka, however, is angry. She's mad about the fact that everyone wants everything to go quickly and that they aren't willing to fight like she is. It's frustrating to hear that they are just allowing cancer to dictate their lives, death, and reactions, but the headmistress corrects her anger and tells her that it's important to understand that we don't have a dog in this race. When death comes, that's it. There are no other options. And so in fighting the inevitable, you lose the chance to say the things that you should say, to live the way that you want to live, and that can be a tragedy in and of itself. Ilanka goes to visit Anya, who is unresponsive. The lack of her response is such a blatant absence because Anya is usually so vocal about her thoughts and opinions, even when they're not wanted. Ilanka retreats to the woods in frustration, and her friend Shasta is there, and she fills her head with a bunch of BS about how nature is healing and it's crazy that birds fly. She learns that Shasta was actually a part of the cult that came before the Paragon by looking at her half-full hourglass tattoo, one that she's seen on different places in the house, the one that she saw more specifically on the elevator button. Shasta tells her exactly what she needs to do in order to get her friend out of the coma that she's in and healed. Ilanka brings it up to the group, and they're all skeptical, but they also agreed to participate because I guess what could go wrong? Sandra is the only one who is apprehensive, however, and says that they shouldn't be messing with things that they don't understand. Outside of the body, there are things that can't be explained. And for Sandra, she sees this sort of thing as a slight to God. She admonishes them for even going there, even attempting to bring this sort of spiritual warfare to her door is an affront to God. Sandra has a dream that Ilanka is performing the ritual, and after she does the steps of the ritual, she's taken by the cultists in the robe. I'm sure this just makes Sandra feel validated in her warning toward Ilanka and the rest of the group. But I also think it's a part of Sandra's subconscious thought about how she views what they're doing. Ilanka is at risk for being, I guess, sort of possessed by these cult members, this ritual that she's doing. She is possessed with the idea of making it so that they all live this happy, joyous, cancer-free life outside of these walls. And it's something that has really become her and possessed her at this point. The group take a very sick Anya downstairs into the basement in order to perform this ritual. Even though there were towels downstairs that spelled out don't, the group still does go through with this ritual, including sacrifices. I mean, it's not live sacrifices or anything, but it's more like sacrifices of the heart. Things that they own that make them feel connected to an event or a person. They're sacrificing, and then they also cut themselves and they burn all of these things. Although it's pretty out there, it's a sweet moment for the teens because it's beautiful to watch them destroy things that matter to them the most in order to help Anya live longer. And it's really a testament to their love for Anya and their desire for her to stick around no matter what. The ritual is performed, and Anya sort of ends up sitting there while it happens, and hands come through from above her and reach for her. The episode ends on that note. So this is just part one of my deep dive on the Midnight Club. It was just getting too long, and I didn't want it to be over an hour. So check back next week. I will likely have everything completed by then, and you can watch the part 2 of the Midnight Club deep dive. We have so much more to talk about, so much more symbolism to get through. So I hope that you subscribe and like, and I'll see you then. Bye.